Okay,
It's a good number.
a good number.
Yeah. Should I upload the PowerPoint now or later?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So, Bula Vinaka, everyone. Bula Vinaka. Can you all hear me? Okay, you might as well start. Looks like everyone's here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and Bula Vinaka, everyone. Firstly, at the offset, on behalf of my colleague Geoffrey and staff here of UNCTAD Pacific, we would like to welcome you all to our webinar today. Thank you all for taking your time to be here with us. And for those that are regular to this forum, we would like to acknowledge and thank you for always partnering with us in socializing a lot of this trade and customs concepts, some of the challenges that we face throughout the Pacific, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, our topic today is single window ecosystem or single window environment. My colleague Geoffrey and I would take us through this. I know that how would you say, this is quite heavy in to some extent, but we would like to lighten this in the sense that it's not really a systems approach, but it's more an environment approach to this and understanding it. So let me start by saying that and ask the question, why do we have single window? Well, that's always the starting point. Why? Why is there a need for a single window? That's always a starting point. And when we ask why single window, the first thing that that comes to mind or brings to bear is the demand for trade. Trade has demanded that we have an environment that allows for the fundamental principles for trade to come through, meaning there has to be predictability, there has to be certainty of trade, there has to be high assurance for compliance, there has to be the proper balance between facilitation and control, and there has to be effort needs to be coordinated amongst agencies. And when you put all of that together, that the only way in which you can have that is by having a single window environment, or a single window ecosystem, is what we will talk about today. That's really the basis of having a single window. That's the why of single window, because global trade, regional trade demands efficiency. It demands predictability, and it demands trust between all players and all actors, whether it's the private sector or government agencies. And with that demand, national economies, regional bodies, global bodies have to come up with a solution that's workable for all. Thus, the solution that everybody sees fit is single window. Now, with single window, it's also important to understand is the rule that governs single window. And you as a customs person, you as a trade person, you work within an environment that's rule-based. As you all know, the rule for trade right now, the international rule for trade across the globe is the WTO TFA. That's the global rule for trade. From a customs perspective, the international rule is always the revised Kyoto Convention. But now, given the demand that trade has to be more inclusive at the border, that includes biosecurity, that includes immigration, that includes environment, that includes all other players, whether it's the airline, whether it's a shipping company, whether it's Ports Authority, the WTO becomes that blueprint. It's the global standard for trade. And with that, it requires customs, it requires trade to align its policy to that. And specifically, maybe you can go to the next slide, Geoffrey. And
Okay.
specifically, under the TFA, the WTO TFA, with all the provisions within the TFA, Article 10.4 is specific on single window, right? And we also need to acknowledge and understand that within the Pacific context, there are 8 WTO member countries. Now, with 8 WTO member countries, all these 8 WTO member countries are internationally obliged to align themselves, to align their policies to the WTO TFA, yeah? And that has been the piece of work that UNCTAD and OCO did in the last 2 years. And moving forward, it's also the work that lays the foundation for our single window work that Geoffrey and I, Rizwan is doing in Palau, Rizwan did for Fiji. So all this single window work, its baseline is stemming out of the WTO TFA and specifically the WTO TFA. And in the customs context, it's the provisions within the RKC. Yeah? So that's your mandate. That's your legal mandate. It's important to understand that trade demands that we have a single window environment to ensure that the principles are covered. Second, your legal mandate sits under the WTO TFA for you to be able to roll that out. Eh? And for WTO member, it's mandatory for them to do this for all the 8 countries. And WTO members in the Pacific are Fiji, PNG, Samoa, Vanuatu, Solomon, the list that are there. And Kiribati is also acceding to this. So they are legally bound to do this. And from a regional perspective, Pacific Island Forum has developed what's called a regional strategy for trade, which is, again, in alignment. The whole thing is aligned to the WTO TFA. In fact, it's just a mirror of the WTO TFA. Yeah? So there's a double obligation. So in terms of those that are not WTO TFA member, you've got the PIFs and you've got the OCO that obligates you to be able to narrow those gaps on a legal perspective. Eh? So all of these things, whether it's a mandatory obligation or voluntary obligation, it's also a commitment to demonstrate that you want to align to international standard. And that's the whole reason why we're having this. Eh? All of the rest of the countries that are non-WTO member, for them, it's a demonstration of commitment to higher standard of performance. You know, when you do that, it shows that you are committing yourself to operating under international trade practice. Eh? And that's a good thing to have. Next slide, please, Geoffrey. Please.
Okay.
So from a legal perspective, from a procedural perspective, the whole idea, as you see with the WTO, the PIF strategy, all of them are bound together under this obligation. So you are not only internationally aligned, you're regionally aligned, and all your national requirements are brought in together in this. So there's a harmony. There's a harmony of process. There's a harmony of procedure. Now, when procedure are harmonized, the next thing that enables that harmony is the system. Yeah, and that's where the single window system, the work that we've been doing with Geoffrey around this. What precedes all of this system work is what I just said: policy, procedures, connection, touch points, then enablement. Eh? So it's important to understand those sequencing. Once those sequencing are correct, and then we're speaking very highly, and this applies across any country. It doesn't matter whether you're PNG or you're Niue, the same principle applies. Yeah? And how your single window environment or your ecosystem is shaped is very much contingent on those different touch points. Yeah? The regulators, what governs you, your connection, and your coordination with the private sector. So over to you. Like I said, it's Geoffrey and I will be doing a tag team around this. So I now hand over to my good colleague Geoffrey, who will take over from here. Thank you, Geoffrey. You're muted, Geoffrey.
Yeah, did you mention anything about the TFA gap analysis?
Good, okay. All right.
Yeah, before I continue.
Okay. Okay, just to further add, the work that we did with OCO, we've identified a gap analysis, legal gap analysis for all of the 15 countries. And most of you that are here, your gap analysis have also already been done. Yeah? And legal work has also been done to narrow those gap analysis. The phase 2 of that work is currently happening right now. So the phase 2 of that work links to, now that all of you have AW, phase 2 of that work means every data that exchange, whether it's electronic signature, whether it's electronic information exchange with the banks, with the shipping company, with government agencies, any form of electronic data exchange now will be sitting in your regulation. So that's phase 2 of the work that we're currently doing. We have a legal person that's currently doing that work with most of you. Most of you, whether we've contacted your heads, we're working also with OCO around this. And that legal reform will put everybody in par in terms of the gap analysis. Yeah? But right now, broadly speaking, the Pacific is almost 85% compliant to the WTO from a regional perspective. Nationally, it varies. Yeah? But I'm giving you a regional overview. But remember one thing, you can be legally compliant, but when you translate it down to your procedural and your SOPs, there will be some gaps around that. Eh? We also did that gap analysis. We've identified that. That's an ongoing work that we will do. That again will dovetail with the ASYCUDA reform work. Eh? So because when SOPs and workflows begin to change, these things also shape how the single window will look like. Eh? Okay, Geoffrey.
Hey.
I think that's about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tevita. Yeah, my name is Geoffrey Kossami. I'm based in PNG, as I think my colleague has already introduced me. So basically from where Tevita just started, the issues that we have been doing, I mean, the issues that we have, I would say, seen, like in terms of doing the consultations, what we've done in the countries was first to analyze and do the consultations with the stakeholders, okay? Now, when we build the single window blueprint, one of the things we start is consultations with the stakeholders. And the group that we normally start with, of course, is the government agencies. And the government agencies tell us what they do. And in most cases, from what we've realized is most of the processes are manually driven. And I would say you'd come with a number, a percentage of about 60 to 70% of the processes are manually driven. So you can see a lot of paperwork. For example, for a trader, when they start moving between one agent to another, there's a lot of paperwork involved. And this is quite a lot for the stakeholders whenever they want to start or initiate the trade process, which is a lot of cost for them. And ultimately that cost comes to the end user and the consumer of the product. The other thing also we realized during their consultations when we were building the blueprint is there's quite a lot of lack of coordination. Yes, the agencies are there. Sometimes there is MOUs, but still when the trader moves from one agency to another, they still have to move about and deal with each agency independently. So you finish off with one agency, then they will ask to go to another agency before you can actually start the trade process. So that's quite a lot of time wasting, and it amounts to all the inconvenience to the trade process or the ecosystem. The other thing which is also a painful thing is delays. There's a lack of sharing of information among agencies. Sometimes the traders, they have to move about because of the lack of information among the agencies. For example, A TIN certificate is issued by the Revenue Department, but the same information could have been easily shared to the other agencies in advance. So you don't have to ask the trader to go to get a TIN certificate while it could have been available while they had, having registered for a TIN earlier before. So this back and forth also creates a lot of delays and a lot of problems. So the problems are the ones that we seek to know so that we can advise what kind of single window that we intend to suggest through the blueprint. So these are the few things from what we gathered through the consultations. Now, why a single window? The single window gives us reasons of why, because it aims to address some of the delays and in trade, the bottlenecks, unnecessary inconveniences, disjointed processes. This is what we have mainly when we do our consultations, and these are our findings. Yeah. So the first thing that we actually look at is why in terms of data elements. The data elements, which when I say data elements, these are the trade data elements. The form that you fill as a trader, those are the fields that we call as data elements related to trade. It is important to harmonize or establish an ease of trade through the harmonization of the data elements, because what we see in most cases, one data elements is defined differently in many agencies. So here you'll say consignor, the other will say trader, the other would say exporter. It's the same meaning, but it's the same meaning, but different ways of naming the trade data element. So the aim here with data harmonization is to have a common data element across the agencies, which will enable the traders to easily fill the forms once, and the data element is available first. It's equally known among the trade government regulatory agencies and the stakeholders like the private sector. And also, one submission in a single window, it means it will allow the data element to easily flow across the agencies, which makes it easy to share the information among the regulatory agencies because it's commonly known. So whenever one agency A goes to agency B, the data element moves across easily because it's known from the first point going to the next, the third or the fourth agency on the supply chain. The other thing that we also have to address when we say why we need a single window is the standardization of documents. Documents have to be standardized. What we realize is some documents have a format which is not having that trade. I would say there's a standard we normally call UNLK. It's a standard that the United Nations Trade Data Element Directory suggested a trade data document which allows you to have a form which is easily can be easily processed. So as soon as you have a form which is easy to process a trade requirement, it's easy even for the traders to move across the supply chain. So sometimes in other cases we find there's just an application form that has to, actually not an application, but just a letter which has to be approved. So such cases normally generate back and forth situations because sometimes the trader can have, information which is not adequate. So they have to be rejected. They go back, fill it again, go back, and that's when the trade document can be accepted by the regulatory agency. So this is a bit inconvenient for the trade. So these are the areas that we also need to look at when we establish a single window. When we talk about the simplification of procedures, currently, we all understand that most of the processes are complicated. It's not easy to move from one procedure to the next. So the aim here is to re-engineer what we have today, because what we do when we do the single window blueprint is we establish the current processes by mapping the process. We map the process, understand where are the gaps, where are the difficulties, and where we can actually improve the current process and make that process much better, which can be easily automated. Then that goes into the single window. So it's a process. Before you can actually improve the current procedure, we need to understand what is happening today, and before we can actually suggest what has to be improved. So dematerialization is one area which is a bit of a pain for the trade, because the same set of documents required by, let's say, 3 agencies on the supply chain, for example, it causes duplication of the same submission of data or documents from the trade. So the aim of dematerialization is to cut down to one submission of trade documents, which can be easily available to the rest or to the other agencies on the supply chain. So this will cut down first the manual paperwork, and secondly, the single electronic submission, which is submitted from the trader, becomes available, easily available and readily available online through the single window. So one single submission. So we dematerialize all the documents into a one set of documents. So the other area that when we say why is the stakeholders, when these stakeholders communicate. When I say stakeholders, I mean the government and the private sector. We need to share the data electronically between the trade partners, because, for example, we have customs, we have an agency, then ultimately we have to meet the shipping industry and the port operator. Okay, so it's a mix of government and the private sector. So there should be an exchange of electronic data between the trade partners. Sometimes we feel that the government should be the only one that should automate. No, it's not the case, because there is an opportunity to make it easier through our trade partners on the supply chain, because it's not only the government that is deeply involved in trade. We also involve the private sector on the supply chain. So these are the areas we also look into. When we do our consultations, we also go to the level of meeting the private sector, including the banks, freight forwarders, the courier service companies. They have to tell us their story and what are the possibilities of automating in that area. Border to border is one of the areas that we also look into, because when we develop the single window, we don't focus only at the national level. We have to look at the regional level as well. So when the government decides to build a single window, it has to also consider the regional single windows in the region. And this is an area that we also have to consider when we build a single window in our country. So these are the things that we also cover when we develop the blueprints, single window blueprint, because it's an area there's already discussions in the region on how these countries should bring their effort together through the current custom system or the single windows in the region. The reduction of costs and processing time is also another area that we also need to look into, because without that, we cannot have a reason to have the single window. So we know that the costs are very high, and we expect a single window will bring down the costs. From what I discussed earlier, you see that the costs and time will be cut because of these new initiatives that we add on to the single window solution. The optimization of controls is another area. Sometimes we have control border agencies that perform functions that can be easily done by another agency. For example, in some cases, as you know, in some areas in the Pacific, we have an immigration officer's function performed by a customs officer. okay? And there are some borders from our consultations. What we found out was some agencies would love to have some of their controls performed by the agencies on the ground, okay? Because of the limited of budget, sometimes we would, some agencies would not have that capacity to spread out in all the control border points. So in this case, the single window will allow and facilitate that capacity to allow the border regulatory agencies to work together, and it will optimize the controls of the border through a coordinated fashion through the single window. Quickly on what we have today, as most of us know, the customs clearance that we have today is more of a single window, but it's very custom centric. It's not adequate to call it as a real single window. Why? The reason is we don't adequately address the goals of all the stakeholders. As you can see, we have, in most cases today, we have the customs, which is in most of the region, countries in the region, we have ASYCUDA. So the ASYCUDA speaks to the importers, the carriers, and the shipping companies and the freight forwarders through the ASYCUDA. In some cases, we have the banks connecting electronically through the electronic payments, and it's not all the case, okay? But in some cases, we have those situations at the moment in the region. So this does not adequately address the real aims, the real projections, the real, the real things that we expect from a single window. We need to adequately cover everyone who is on the supply chain. And that is why we bring this trade-centric clearance approach, which builds to the single window. It aims to bring a solution through the whole architecture. When we talk about trade, the trade supply chain, we have to involve everybody on the supply chain. Not only the custom-centric, that approach that we have today, we have to involve all the border regulatory agencies, and as I said earlier, the private sector. We cannot leave them out of the whole supply chain. We need to get them involved so that when we link every touch point in the supply chain, it allows the trade to flow easily, to flow seamlessly, and it becomes very efficient, cost-effective, and very less time-consuming, and it becomes a very a fostered trade environment for the trader. So this is the aim of why we need to have a single window. It will bring everybody on board, and of course, customs normally is at the center of most of what's happening in trade at our borders. Next is the blueprint, which Tevita and I mentioned a bit earlier. This is a document that we develop for the stakeholders to know. Actually, we bring it to their attention that, look, before we can build a single window, we need to have a proper plan. We need to have a structured approach to build a single window. We need to, before we put that in place, we need to speak to everyone. We need to consult as much as possible. So the aim is to have a guided structure approach to build this system, and we involve all the stakeholders as much as we can. Normally, we don't underestimate. It's better to overestimate and to know who is available on the trade. Then later, after the assessment and analysis, that's when you can realize who are the actual trade players on the trade supply chain. So with this, you can realize the interagency workflows. So the blueprint will give you a real design, and the workflows will be clearly stated because it will show you what exactly is happening. So we map the current processes, which are the as-is. The current processes are properly mapped. We actually study the flow pattern of all the trades happening in each agency and how each agency is interlinked with the subsequent agency. Though we don't see that today operationally, but in actual fact, when you speak to the trader or our stakeholders who are actually involved in the trade supply chain, they tell you, when I move from this agency, I have to go to the next, I have to go to the next before I actually exit my cargo from the wharf. So all this is shown in the blueprint, and actually when we map the process, we also suggest how these current difficult or stringent processes can be improved so that it can be easily implemented in a single window which has an improved trade process, not the current process that we have today, but an improved process, which we call it a 2B process, okay? Something of the future, something which has been improved based on the assessment or analysis of the current processes that we currently have in trade. The other thing that we also look is and take into account is the legal framework. We review what is currently available in terms of what can be done today with our current legal framework. Is it adequate to support the establishment of the single window? Or is there anything additional that we have to do? Are there any amendments? Or are there actually missing acts that has to be available to make it possible to establish a single window? So some of the important acts is the Electronic Transaction Act, for example. Some countries in the region already have this act in place, which makes it very easy for countries to establish a single window because the act allows them to transact electronically between agencies and in the trade. Yeah. So far, what I can say, the output is the national blueprint that we have is countries like Samoa already have. I mean, Samoa are about to have their copy very soon. And Vanuatu, as my colleague, PNG, I think we already finished the PNG. Let me just show you the current status, for example. My colleague mentioned earlier, Fiji is already completed. PNG already completed the blueprint. Tonga is already completed and validated. And Palau, Samoa is going to get their first draft very soon. And Kiribati consultations have already started. So we'll be going to Kiribati, I think it's late next month, where we can continue the process. You can see there's a lot has been happening this year. You can see 2025, we have been very active to support the countries in the region through the Impact Project, to support the countries to make a proper blueprint, a proper document, which can guide them into establishing the single window. And of course, there'll be future discussions with other countries. For example, Solomon Island is one of the countries that we consider for the future discussions. And we can also still have the door open for other countries to join into having this single window blueprints. I know there are some interest still coming up, and we are ready to assist in this end. Yeah. So the journey is to have this blueprint to define the journey which guides us from where we are today to where we are going to be when we have the single window established. So some things like the forms, the permits and the licenses, we need to expect digitization. So these are the things that we need to get ready. What we feel today manually on a single window is going to be in a digital form, which is, I know it's going to be, it's a big cultural shift, because culturally today we believe that seeing is believing. Like, I need to have a proper form in front of me, fill it, submit it, stamp it. And these are the things that we need to expect when we digitize the whole supply chain. And this is what the blueprint actually defines and guides us into how we can get to that point. And of course, the agency roles and the integration points will also be established in the blueprint. As I mentioned earlier, we are working in silos today, which is okay. But when we move to the single window, it's going to be a link, an electronic link between the agencies. Decisions will be done electronically, and the process will be quite fast. And the automation and the data exchange will also be well covered, because, as I said earlier, when we establish a single window, we focus much into electronic exchange of data, and between the agency to agency, agency to the private sector, and the whole single window to the whole region. So you can see there is a move from what we do today to automation, to automating what we are actually doing today in the trade supply chain at the national level, and subsequently that will go to the regional level. So you can see there's quite a lot to do there, and it's easy as soon as you have something in place to guide you into that process. Yes, maybe I should hand over to my colleague Tevita if you want to continue the touch points. Tevita?
No. Oh, thank you, Geoffrey.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just very briefly summarize everything that you said, so that
Yeah.
Yeah, and then thank you for just unpacking those things for us.
Yeah.
I think for some it might not be easy to relate because they don't have the environment, but as a trade person, like what we said earlier, this is more than just a system. A single window is not about a digital platform. It's a sequence of elements are very important. It's ecosystem, laws, people, institution, and system. It's important to understand that sequence. And Geoffrey has unpacked that very neatly for us. The policy, the laws come first. Once the policies because remember, trade is rule-based. Customs is rule-based. All other agencies at the border are rule-based agencies. They are governed by their policy. But those policies must align to international standard. It needs to be harmonized. And then following off from that are their processes, are their SOPs. All of those things need to coordinate. The SOPs need to spell harmony. It needs to spell coordination. Yeah, the SOPs needs to, because that's where the touch points of clearance comes in. Yeah, that's where the different touch points of clearance come in. Then the institutional framing, where people come in. People need to understand the shift that's happening. Some of the organization, their policy deputizes customs to do work. Some of the organizations, like environment, they deputize customs to do ODS work. Like biosecurity, they to some extent can deputize for HS codes and things like that, depending, but it's country specific. Some countries, there's joint inspection. Some countries there, and all these things are legislated. So these are the harmonizing points. These are the touch points that Geoffrey was talking about. Because remember, you cannot enforce what you cannot legislate. If it's not in your policy, these are the things that we can't push. Yeah, we need to allow for these things to shape what the single window environment will look like. So, and at the earlier stage, I spoke about the second phase of work that we're doing. So the key legal provision moving forward, now that everybody, 16 countries use AW, is the allowance for e-submissions, e-signatures, the legal recognition for digital record keeping, the mandate of agencies to share information, and then the formal single window governance, which includes the NTFC. For some of you, you have NTFC in country. All these things needs to sequence itself properly. So for us to be able to see this thing happen, because there's a saying that you probably would hear some of these guys say this: you cannot digitize chaos. So when you're not re-engineering the process, you just want to digitize the as is. That'll never happen. You've got to re-engineer the old process, harmonize them, then you re-engineer them. It's only the re-engineered process that will be automated, which will result in the single window data submission, the dematerialization that Geoffrey was talking about. Your workflow now will be able to see some level of integration, integration with government, integration with other port community or whatever that's there. But I think, Geoffrey, another big thing that we also need to talk about is the change management that happens across. All these things that we're talking about, it's easy to plug. You can do that, consultants can come in, do it, but it's the shift in mindset. Shift in mindset by agencies where the effort needs to be coordinated. It's important to understand this, So
Yeah.
once all this work is also part of the work that we do when you go into develop blueprints, understand the silo mentality, and understand the coordination, also understand the people just like to operate in the environment. You need to respect that, but that has to change over time. So these are some of the things that we take into consideration, and they can also be country specific. So I think very briefly, Geoffrey and everybody, that's us. And if there's any question, it'll be good to take questions now.
Yeah. Next is maybe there's also a touch on the articles. Yeah. The articles that we have mainly is for the single window. As you can remember, Tevita is the article 10.4.
Okay. Yes. You want us to explain this?
Yes, if you want to add something on that, maybe before I move on to the next slide.
Okay. All right. So Article 10.4 is a specific article in the WTO TFA that's for single window. That's so it's a specific article for single window that makes mention single window. But the principle of it is everything that we're telling you now. But in the slide that's put up here, you've got Article 5.3 and Article 8, which includes our friends from biosecurity. 5.3 is biosecurity, specific for biosecurity, and 10.1 is the TBT. And as you know, some around TBT, the SPS commitment of cytosanitary. These are the cytosanitary that's specific to biosecurity, and some of the technical barriers to trade that we have on labeling and all these things. These are some of the technical requirements that what's minimal and what's allowable for you to be able to put in there. So these are again the rules, that international rule that gives countries specific elements that they can include within their provisions.
Yeah. And maybe to add what you mentioned, Tevita, is when we develop the blueprint, one of the areas that we also analyze and check is the compliance of, how much the country has gone into complying what's been agreed in the TFA. So we know Article 10.4 is for the building of the single window, but as what Tevita mentioned, there are some other articles around the Article 10.4, which supports the buildup of the single window system. So we cannot focus only on Article 10.4, but we also look into the other articles that support the establishment of the single window. As I mentioned earlier, and what my colleague said again, is we need to harmonize, because harmonization, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the recommendations by the UNCFACT. I think it's recommendation Article 34, if I can remember correctly. Harmonization actually pushes, it's a recommendation, which is important to take, because if we don't take these recommendations, it means when we build our single windows, it means we are going to face problems along the way. So the aim of harmonization is to reduce these errors that we have, or discretionary delays, and even real-time decision-making will be improved, because when you harmonize the data and the whole process, it makes it easier for the trade to move as quickly as possible. So this is one of the activities that we are currently doing in PNG after the submission of the single window blueprint, is to harmonize the trade data forms from each regulatory agencies. Yeah. So the future is as what you see here. TRS also sets the current benchmark. Like the TRS is an important area that we also need to see when we develop the blueprint, because it will allow the TRS to get the adequate information along the supply chain. The single window is very helpful to make the TRS very detailed, because you capture the information from the start of the process or the supply chain to the very end of the process. So this will allow you to read any delays. You can sense where the problem is, where the delays, and where you can improve. So it's a continuous improvement model, which is part of that establishment of the single window. And it will support countries to know where the delays, and that information can also help you to see where exactly you have to improve in the single window. Much as what the single window is also telling you, clearly where the delays, where are the any difficulties or bottlenecks, you can see clearly because of the transparency that you have in the single window. But TRS is also an additional support to that continuous improvement, which will help not only customs, but also the other trade regulatory agencies on the supply chain. So, call to action. Do you want to wrap this up, Tevita?
Yeah, thank you, Geoffrey. Maybe just to backtrack a little on the TRS. I think, the part of the work that we're doing now is an automated TRS that our colleague Ravi has developed here. The idea, okay, as we speak, the TRS module is being deployed to a lot of you. But as we speak, the scope of the TRS is very much still custom-centric. But this will expand, like what Geoffrey was saying. As we speak, the scope of the TRS is within customs. But now with those, for example, Vanuatu is the only one that has a single window platform that's in place. Vanuatu will have the capability to be able to measure the bottlenecks within the value chain. So in the context of the trade environment, single window environment, Vanuatu has an end-to-end, meaning when the manifest comes in virtual, hits the border, it has everybody. It has biosecurity and everybody automated. You're able to see where the bottlenecks are along the supply chain. But in the context of customs right now, we're still within the customs clearance point. But that's the starting point, and it will expand out as we progress. I just want to clarify that. And thank you, Geoffrey. That's basically it for us.
Okay.
And maybe the last point, the whole reason, the rationale behind all of this, behind single window and TRS is the measurement of performance. You measure your performance baseline, because remember, we are always continuously improvement driven. So you can't improve what you don't measure. So when we measure our performance, we identify the bottlenecks, we address the bottlenecks. So we address them either through policy change or improvements or reinvention, whatever it is. You know how to diagnose that problem, deal with it. So now you have the data to be able to do it, you have the system to be able to run that, and that should be able to help you. So it's self-improvement along the way. So we have now the tool to be able to do that. I think that's about it, my friend.
Yes.
So, yes, we're good to hear some questions from the floor.
Okay, so just before we see the questions, just to inform the members that currently we have about 13 projects with a single window in the world. So that's already, Vanuatu is one of the countries represented in that 13 countries, and many more will be coming. So these 13 countries will be, the number will be growing soon, because there are some projects that are being signed by some other countries. So just as an update for the region, that we can also just bring them up to speed to what's happening in the other countries. Otherwise, we thank you everybody for listening, and we welcome you for any questions, and so that we can just provide few answers or responses. Let me check if there's anything in the chat. Okay. Hey. Yeah, thank you very much. I see some people clapping.
Thank you very much.
We don't want clapping. We want you to ask questions.
Yeah, we need some questions. You just ask anything related to what we presented today in the webinar. You just feel free, yeah?
Remember, we're in the Pacific. It's a dialogue. It's a Talanoa session. So for all of you New South Wales fans that lost, you can next year. John and crew.
Any questions? Feel free to ask anything with the additional comments that I'm seeing on the chat. Thank you.
I think that's about it, eh?
Yeah, I don't see any questions so far.
Okay.
Maybe it's a new topic for some, but with time, I think we'll understand what actually, when we say single window, and the future will tell us much about the single window. But it's a good session that will prepare us, I mean, psychologically, that what kind of work is coming, the size, and what coverage, the scope.
Yeah.
We won't only focus on the government, we'll focus with everybody on the trade supply chain. Yeah.
There's a question here from Amitesh. So the question is, how will single window assist in e-commerce? So, and that's a very good question. So I think we'll maybe I'll start if that's okay, Geoffrey.
Yeah,
maybe from our end, e-commerce, as you know, it's that's the way to go, moving forward. So e-commerce built itself around expedited clearance, fast clearance. So now that we have single window environment where information is converged, decisions are converged under one, it helps expedite that decision-making process. It also helps harmonize the rules that govern that process. So the whole idea in predictability and certainty around that, with the single window platform, it allows for that facilitated process. But that also at the same time, it doesn't undermine the security requirements. You're able to strike that balance between facilitation and compliance improvement over time. So maybe, yeah, and over to you, Geoffrey. Maybe that in some way helps in the e-commerce.
Yeah, that's what you say is true. And the other thing I just wanted to also inform the other members is when we do the consultations in building the single window, we normally speak to the trade, not only with the trade sector, but also the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce tells us a lot of stories. They tell us, actually, because of the experience that they have in commerce in the country, if you link it with trade, you can see actually what's happening in trade. It actually matches with what they are explaining in terms of the challenges that is happening in the commerce. So in the commercial space, when we speak to the Chamber of Commerce, they tell us quite a lot of information, and we take that on board when we build the single window blueprint. So we don't only look at the trade, but also the people who are around the trade supply chain, who are the people who are dealing with commerce. And so if you have it in electronic form through the e-commerce, gathering all those views from the Chamber of Commerce has been quite substantial in terms of showing us what's really happening, what's actually there, what is missing, what are the challenges, what the single window needs to address more than what we had initially thought. Okay, so just to update them on that as well. I just wanted to make it very clear that we cover as much as possible as we can. Yeah. Yes, please.
And the other thing, Geoffrey, very quickly, the other thing is that for de minimis, when you talk about de minimis for e-commerce, single window, allows for that process to be automated. So now that you have because the de minimis threshold varies across the Pacific. So now when you have that, it allows you to be able to see that real time, and you look at the variation that might happen. Even from a risk management perspective, you be able to identify low value consignments, because these are usually areas where a lot of these guys, they exploit for movement of drugs and other type of contrabands and narcotics. So with an automated environment, it allows you to be able to target and then profile around that. So that's another thing in the context of e-commerce.
Yeah, any more comments, views, suggestions? Just feel free to share your views. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's about it, Geoffrey.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, if there's anything, I mean, the member states in the region, they can always reach out to us in our regional office in Fiji. Just for, I think there's a question here for the countries that they have already implemented single window. Are the digital documents legally recognized under the national laws? Yes, of course.
Simple answer is yes.
It's yes, because before you can digitally transact, as I mentioned, I think during my presentation, is one of the things that we look at is the legal framework before we can establish a single window. And one of the acts that supports the digital documents through transaction is the Electronic Transaction Act. Most, I would say some countries, not most, because we need to see what the other countries have, but some of the countries that we've already consulted through the process of building the single window blueprint, we've realized some of the countries already have the Electronic Transactions Act, so which makes it very easy to establish a single window. So yes, I'd say, or to answer your question is yes, they are legally recognized under the national laws. And that's where we also insist in establishing a legal framework which can support the establishment of the single window. If you want to add something, Tevita, to that, you can, if you want.
Oh, that's I think that's correct, because that is really the pre-work. That's the pre-work that we are talking about.
Yes.
The automation of what is the legislating of documentation that needs to be transacted within the environment. So that's the pre-work. You can't transact anything outside of your frame of law. So if not, it'll be illegal. So, which again informs into our phase 2 of work that we're doing now. Like what we said, electronic signature, all the information exchange that we're doing right now, all those things are part of phase 2. A legal record of record keeping, digital record keeping, and the mandating agencies to share data across. So all those things are a part of the work that we're doing now. For those that don't have it, so we'll have that. That's the current work that we're doing.
Okay.
All right.
I think there's a question. There's another question, I think. Yeah. You want to take that?
How does single window contribute to reducing compliance cost and increasing efficiency in customs? Yeah, that's a good question. How does single window contribute to reducing compliance cost and increasing efficiency in customs clearance? And that's a very good question. So it's one is the compliance cost. So the cost of compliance, because the idea behind efficiency is reducing the cost of compliance. What meaning? How can the private sector, through what they are regulated, through the regulation, increase their compliance level? But sometimes for them to comply, there are certain requirements that obligates them to perform certain tasks. And the idea behind this, like for example, documentation, the submission of documentation, the printing of documents, all of those things, it's cost to business. Now with the digital electronic information exchange, all of these things, it's just by a press of a button, it's digitally one document is shared amongst everybody upon which decision is made. That's very efficient. That cuts out all the transaction cost there. And the other is the dematerialization of dematerialization is the pivot point upon which that set of documents, all decisions are made in that. So that actually cuts down the transaction cost. It makes it more efficient. It also makes it very transparent. So it addresses a lot of these issues in different ways. So, and thank you for that question. In that way, it also ensures compliance, that one set of documents, biosecurity makes decision on that document, customs make decision on that all the way through. So you can see that decisions are made on one side, and that's what dematerialization means, and that also decreases the compliance cost on customs clearance.
Just to support your
Go ahead,
your answer, Tevita. Yeah, like sometimes when the regulations are very stringent, they normally create smugglers, for example. Sometimes smuggling is based on what controls that we have in place. Now, imagine a single window in place, smooth process, everything is smooth, seamless. I mean, compliance will just go up, because what made people to become smugglers those bottlenecks are gone. Like, why do I have to go through 10 agencies or 4 agencies before I can get my product at the wharf, or maybe at whatever border point? So if the process is seamless, why do we have to think about avoiding these processes? So what Tevita mentioned earlier is correct, and that's a very good question, I can say. Okay. I think that's about it.
You know your different phases of the journey. Implementation.
Wow.
Would you like to start with it, Geoffrey?
What
maybe.
Could
you briefly give us
the phases
overview, the different phases of a single window journey? So
okay. Maybe I can start, then you can finish it, Tevita. Okay, before the journey starts, what I would suggest, from the experience that we had in the region, and from the consultations that we've been having, and also based on some implementations of single windows that I know personally, I would suggest, if you have a single window, it will guide you into having the journey. It will show you the journey from point A to the final product of the single window. So first phase, I would advise have a single window blueprint, which can give you exactly the picture, the total picture, the total roadmap, what you have to do. And sometimes if you have that in place, it means it will allow you to plan according to the size of your ambition, okay? Yes, you would love to have your single window to cover, for example, all the 13 agencies at the time, at the same time. But the blueprint will give you options. You can say, okay, I can take it phase by phase according to the budget that I have. So the blueprint will tell you or show you everything what is possible based on, first, the resources that you have, the funding, the personnel, everything that you have in place, what is possible today. Okay, so it will give you that roadmap. Then the blueprint itself will also give you the phases. Within the blueprint, it shows you all the phases from phase 1, where you have to, of course, the first thing that you have to do is to analyze your current processes that are linking, because now you're not linking the agencies in the traders or the private sector, but you need to know the process of each stakeholder in the process. Once you know that, then you have to map what has to be in the future, the to-be process. So you do that mapping and design the re-engineered process for the future, the to-be process. Then that's where you can build or establish the single window based on a re-engineered process. Okay, based on what my colleague said earlier. Then from that stage, then you can start the project, develop the single window. You have to seek for funds. Obviously, you need the funds to do the job. So you can either involve the national resources. Maybe the current budget can allow the funding of the project. You can start it off from there, but since it's a category C, as what we saw in the presentation, it allows you to seek for funds. Okay, to seek for funding from other development partners who are also actually willing to take part of that process. So they step in. Then, based on the blueprint and the roadmap that you have, it's easy to convince anybody with funds that, oh, this is what I am planning to do, and this is what I want as a single window blueprint. Okay, so you start the blueprint development using. Okay, you can involve, for example, a private sector. For example, you can reach out to the private sector, the bid. Or you can ask for technical assistance to the United Nations Conference of Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Obviously, it should be through the regional office in Fiji. Then, whatever options you have on the table, then you make a decision. Okay, I would want the system to be developed. Then you start the development. After development, of course, you have to do the test phase and the prototype. When you prototype the system, you prototype it maybe in a smaller port where you have few agencies, and then you roll it out in the whole country, and ultimately in the region, because the single window has to be plugged with the other countries as well. Then ultimately, you finally launch, and you go live in the whole country, and it's done. But after implementation, you need to monitor and evaluate. Whatever you did, you planned, you must evaluate whether you have done your proper plan and where are the gaps, where are if you went low on some of the requirements, you have to see what you can improve, because whatever you invest even today in your business, you need to monitor whether you're progressing. Are you getting profits? You need to see, is it sustainable? Okay. So these are the things you need to think about when you plan a single window. Maybe Tevita, if you want to add something onto that, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Geoffrey. Maybe just very quickly, the brief assessment is the initial diagnostic assessment that's done, which is the situation analysis. We look at the as-is, but remember, this time is not the as-is for customs only. It's everybody in the supply chain. Eh? So it's a diagnostic assessment on where everyone is at and how everyone is connected. You know, so that's important to understand, where everyone is at and how everyone is connected. Now, that we look at that from as is current. Everyone's at how everyone's connected and how everyone is connected in how they regulate the private sector. That's the first architecture that we put in place. The second one is how you take that current to where it is supposed to be. Where it is supposed to be is based on the international standard, which is the WTO TFA, what we're talking about, the legal framework, because all of you that operate at the border are bound by legal obligation. So this is how we benchmark it against. So once all of those those procedures, those gaps are identified, and then with the gaps that are identified, legal procedures are harmonized, they're re-engineered, then you begin to start talking about automation. You know, so this is, I'm just breaking that down very simply, very briefly for us. But the other thing is also important is what are some of the infrastructural requirements, like internet, power supply, the infrastructure at the port. All of these things are captured in your situational analysis or with your diagnostic
Analysis.
assessment. These things are fundamental. These are paramount because you can have a good document coming out of that. If your power is inefficient, it's not enough to supply. If there's some infrastructure issues that needs to be in place, that also needs to happen. If the banks cannot connect well, these are some of the things that needs to be highlighted, because the risks of not capturing this at the initial stages, it'll amplify itself when it comes to rollout. So everything and anything has to be documented at the diagnostic assessment stage, which Geoffrey and I have been doing it for some of these countries. So I think the next one is Kiribati, Geoffrey.
Yeah, correct. Kiribati,
All right.
yeah.
All right. Yep. Very briefly.
I think I've answered Jenny's question. We've answered.
Yep.
Both. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I think we can.
Yeah. I think we can
come
wrap
to
it
an
up
end
now.
to wrap it up. Okay. Just a few words. We thank you for your listening and attending to this webinar. We are glad that we received a couple of questions. It shows that there's a lot of interest to know what is a single window, how it can benefit. We are more than happy to assist you in terms of deciding what type of single window can assist you. So through the blueprint, single window blueprint that we're developing in UNCTAD, we can also assist in guiding you into having that decision. Otherwise, we thank you for your time. If you want to add something, Tevita, maybe?
I think just thank you to everyone. Thank you for being here with us. And I know that some of you are missing your lunch. Sorry, we cannot compensate for that. We can only give you wind pie. So, but thank you for today. There's been some suggestions around the vessel notification. Yeah, we will look to talk about that maybe in the next webinar. So there's been some have been texting to have vessel notification. I know there's a lot of interest around that. But we'll come up with that and we'll continue to engage with you. Thank you again, everyone, for taking time out.
Thank you.
Naka.